Like if you were to say your insights that you've had over 20, 25 years of engagement with FKS and the things that you can see about Khasi reality, what is it that makes you stand out on this line compared to others who cannot see, like who cannot get these arguments? Why they're not able to get these arguments? Why they're not able to see the reality in the way you are able to see it? So what is it that you have? What is it that you have kind of, somewhat train yourself in the process of engaging with this reality that helps you see the reality differently? So these are the questions we generally call the question concerning methodology. What is exactly, how did you collect this? How did you verify this data? What are the ways you collected the archive? How do you organize this archive? And then how do you get insight from these archives and these from engagement and all that? And the second question is related to how is it that you have been able to see certain things which others are not able to see? What is it that others should do in order to be able to get insights the way probably you have? So in my experience, I'll just share a little bit 5 minutes about my experience. I have been working on this because I'm in the engagement on tribal studies. Many people are producing a lot of data about so many things. But one of the things that they don't generally clarify is this thing called methodology. So some of us, especially in Tribal Collective, we are very concerned about this methodology. Like, what is the methodology in which we should begin to produce and engage with realities that we are doing right now? So Western European methodology is very, very rigid. You have to collect data, you have to verify this data, you have to check this data, you have to ask about this data, you go and speak to people, you collect archives. They're very, very clear about how they do this process. We, on the other hand, are not very clear. Like, for instance, if you get something from the archive, like one letter from 1774, how do you interpret that letter? From our perspective, it is clear how other people will interpret, whether you're a Western European or whether you're whoever you may be. But people from the community, how do we interpret this archive? Because we know that the archive is not the truth about the condition. There are many more realities that existed, which the archive doesn't allow us to see, because we are reading their version of the history. We are not trying to give our story from our side. So at the personal level, what I have always tried to understand and engage with is, how do we produce our own way of doing and engaging with these realities and producing interpretations about these realities, getting deeper insights about these realities. So these are the questions that has been coming to me. So one of the ways in which I generally do things, especially from my side, is I use something called, which is the opposite of colonialism. One of the things about colonialism is that over a period of time, colonialism began to mark people as superior and inferior. And they began to produce knowledge about this inferior. And in the production of that knowledge, they began to define who that community is, that reality is. They began to classify, they began to compare. And in the process of this classification and comparison, they produce a subject that is inferior to them. So this is exactly how colonial anthropology, colonial production of knowledge has taken place. We, on the other hand, we have been talking about something called decolonial. Decolonial means challenging this way of producing knowledge that produces a reality that there is an inferior and a superior. Instead, the way we produce knowledge is that there is no superior and inferior, but instead there are diverse realities coexisting with each other. So when you produce knowledge from that angle, then it becomes very different. So we call this, like I personally call this, the decolonial approach to knowledge production. Then in this decolonial approach to knowledge production, what basically happens is that a lot of this knowledge is historical in nature. So the colonialists have their own ways of producing history. They write their history from their particular perspective about reality. The nationalists, also in India, they have their own ways of producing history from their perspective. How do we, as a community, what is our perspective of producing knowledge about our history, is the question that we are asking now. So one of the things that comes to my mind is what I call something called dialogue or dialogical history. And dialogical history is that when we produce history, we don't produce history that constructs other people, that frames other people, that defines other people. We are just producing a knowledge that converses with other people, that talks to other people. Like we don't go and produce knowledge about Nagas. Instead, we talk to Nagas through our knowledge. We don't go produce about Assamese. Instead, we whatever knowledge we produce, we kind of have a dialogue with the Assamese. So our knowledge is dialogical. Our knowledge is not to frame, to define, to control, but it's more to dialogue, to converse, to provide deeper insight. So I generally call this dialogical history. So these are the two ideas which generally comes to my mind about how do we produce this knowledge, and how do we, even this book of ours, how do we write this book? Is it a dialogical book, or is it a book that frames certain things? Does it give a new interpretation about history, or is it just nothing but to chronologize the archives that we have been able to collect? Is there new insights that we are giving? And if we are giving these insights, from where are we giving these insights? Or are we just defining and classifying and describing certain realities? So these are the questions that generally comes to my mind. I have many more things to share on this line, but I thought that just this framework that I've given, probably if you can reflect on this framework, how in the process of this 20, 25, 30 years of engagement, what are the ways in which you engage with this reality? How do you see this reality? How do you produce these realities? Not only the production, but how do you see this knowledge? What is the use of this book, for instance? What is the use of the knowledge that you have produced? How will it feed into the society? How will it change and transform society? Is knowledge for power? Is knowledge for truth seeking? Is knowledge for control? Is knowledge for political negotiation? What is this knowledge that we are producing about? Like, why do we produce this knowledge for what? There are certain communities that produce knowledge, like colonial knowledge is for power, because if they can control you, you can't control someone who is an equal. You can only control someone who is an inferior. So it is first important to make you inferior before I can control you. Is this the kind of knowledge that we are producing? Is our knowledge about inferiorizing? Is our knowledge about controlling? Or is it our knowledge about a dialogue, a conversation, a story, a narrative about our reality? Is this knowledge about power? Is it knowledge about truth seeking? Are we seeking our own truth and deepening that truth to many people in the community? So these are the kind of questions that I thought I'll ask you today, just to get your reflection in. How do we look at these processes? So I'll stop here, then probably we can go on from there.
Okay.
I can hear you first. Yeah.
Sure.
I will also write it down. And we are recording this.
Okay. So it's a great, what should I say? Great opportunity to have been able to co-author with you this book on the realities, the story, the facts, producing the facts of. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, we can hear you very clearly. No, we can hear you very clearly.
Yeah. On the facts of this, the Khasi history. Fortunately, we have these kingship. Fortunately, we have the kingship, this imship, dollarship, nokmaship. So particularly in Khasi Hills, the kingship, this imship, Lingdo, the Khasi states. So fortunately, we have this system. When it started, there's just no, just no record. But it started. It is there on the ground, and it is there on the ground, and we interact. We engage with it on a day as common citizens. We engage with it on a daily basis. Now, what was the processes that I adopted in pursuing this this important, it's like a revelation. It's like a kind of an awareness. It initially started off like, from the politics. I was supposed to, I was being pursued to contest the MDC election way back in 1998. And being one who would like to, thoroughly read and figure out what this is all about. So I thought, okay, let me check it out. Prior to that, I was, I was also one of the general secretaries of the Hill People Union. Started my work, from those days. My eldest brother was also one of the, got elected as an MLA. And we've been associated or engaged in this tradition, strangely, coincidentally, from our own village of Lai Mukra. We had to really. That's another story. We had to really fight it out to re-establish the tradition of convening the annual Darbar in the village of Lai Mukra, which which got us into contact with the same active same at that point of time, which activated the local youth of the organization of the village. Every village has a Seng Samla, and so those activities got us to firstly also helped us to to understand that there was this concept of democracy at that ground level, and that democracy, that traditional democracy which was there, and it was our birthright to have that annual gathering of the village. It is sort of like a village assembly once a year, or as and when matters arose. So it started from there. My eldest brother became Robert Khasi became probably at that time one of the youngest headmen in the Khasi Hills, because then they would then be known as Timen Shnong. Timen Shnong means somebody very elder, the eldest elder, the wisest, most experienced elder in the village. Then they had to say Ramba Shnong, because he was not a Timen. Timen means old, elderly. So that encounter, that we went to the CM of Millennium, and he said, if you have 100 signatories, we will convene the Dobashan. That will become the Dobashan. That will be your recognized assembly. That was a process of requisitioning your platform in the village. If there were 100 signatories within Himalayam, that was the practice. Fortunately, the elders then decided to convene, and they were, replaced. And my elder brother became the Ramashno. There was another thing that triggered me. I'm just giving you the short points that a very, very memorable, should I say, experience. Scary also at one point as a young fellow at that time. This way back in the 95, 96. No, probably not 95, 93, 94, I think. And, this is way back in 1987, 88. 87, 88, 86, 87, 88. That period. So when my brother became the village headman, you see, then you realize that you also had the power of legislation. That is the tradition. You had the power of legislation. The village headman and the committee, they are duty bound to implement, execute the decisions of that people's assembly in the village. One of which was to close down a very infamous night bar, a liquor bar, which was causing a lot of problems, and the women folk were really, really upset. And then so they decided that it had to be closed down. So the village committee gave a notice to that village bar to close down, shut down. They said, no, we are operating in accordance with the excise permit license issued by the government. And that's when the trouble started. My brother, the headman, he again convened and said, look, They refuse to shut because they say they have the authority from the government. And the Doba said, no, we've given them time to close. If they don't close, we go and lock it up. So they went and locked it up. And on locking it up, just after, whatever time, then he was placed under arrest, under detention, under a very, very draconian law. Very, very, it was, I think, that maintenance of internal security law. And he was probably one of the first who was then detained, put in jail under that law in Meghalaya. Earlier they had Misa, then I think they changed it into another name. I can't remember it right now, but it was the same act. So the whole village was in an agitated mood. We went. They planned to go and get out the jail and, do a satyagraha actually and go and fill themselves up in jail, because they said the headman was just implying their, complying their orders. Then when we went to the district jail, only to be told next day that, he's already been shifted. So it was a scary moment. And my late mother, myself, we drove all the way. Later on, I'm coming to know through very confidential sources that he was being taken to Garavils. And so we went there. Fortunately, we found him well and safe and, fine, but inside the jail. And it was only subsequently after about a month or two that we went to the court, and he pleaded himself and then was released from jail. This was something that triggered in my mind that, why is this happening? And prior to that also, I've heard from my late father, about Martin, Professor, as he's well known as Professor Martin N. Majau, about the instrument of session, about the rights of the chiefs, that we never merged, that the land. And he too had pursued a case on behalf of the Nongklau clan. Practically almost 60% of the city capital of Shillong, he pushed a case on their behalf as their attorney, as their representative, legal attorney in the court, to ask for the government to come to renegotiate their authority. Of course, in that case also, the government took a stand that this is a lifetime, a gift signed by that Nongklau, that ancestor, Bet Nongklau. And then when the High Court, in the end, the ruling was, this is Bharat. The Khasi states have been merged by constitution, mind you, the language, by constitution. And so what we nowadays call that we were merged by description. Somebody wrote there, just put Khasi state within the first schedule under Assam, and we became merged. Whereas that process of merging us through notifications, through procedural processes which were done for all the over 565, 565 princely states. So there was a procedure according to, I think if I'm not mistaken, according to 290A and 290B of the Government of India Act 1935. If you are merged, then there was another notification. If you were upgraded into a province, like Tripura became a state, so there was a different notification. So these are the things that triggered my thought process, and I kept, disturbing me in my mind as to what are these, where is the confusion? How can there be a gray area on the land ownership? Then my late father brought in, also notified the making effect of the Meghalaya Transfer of Land Regulation Act 1971 on the 7th. It was notified on the 7th of June 1978, and it was published in the Gazette on the 8th of June. Now, so these are things which kept disturbing me as a young person, and at that time got into the politics, became, swayed in that idea that, okay, it's only the regional parties that were protecting what took up the cause of the people and this and that. And in that encounter, I contested my first, legislative election. Of course, totally on a political platform. And that was also a situation where actually my eldest brother was supposed to contest, and I could not. And he didn't. He wasn't in India then. He was abroad for some other activity. And in that process, I had to. Contest. So there was a big demand that since his brother is not around, the younger brother can come and contest. So I came in and I decided to contest and came second. There were created history because in that particular constituency there were 14 contestants. Then after that, always in Meghalaya, after the MLA election comes the MDC election. So when I had convened a meeting to just thank the people, for all the people who had voted for me, I then they just said, no, you have to continue and get on with the next election, which is the MDC election. And that is when I said, okay, let me, do some study and find out what this is all about. And that is when the whole journey started. Because the notion that what is sixth schedule, what is district council, it was about the traditional institutions. It is the shield that will protect the Khasi people, the tribes, and so on and so forth. So I started studying the sixth schedule, and I went to CM Dr. Balaji, the most eminent among the CMs, the most respected among the CMs. I went to him and I asked him. He's a medical doctor by background. I went and asked him, what's your thing? So he also, looking at me from an angle of, this is another budding politician, and told me that, yes, we all hope that you will get through to the MDC, you should go ahead. So I read a little more. Lo and behold, I came across this act of 1959. And then realized that, this suddenly this is wrong. I hold the CM in high reverence because of the office that he occupies and that institution that he represents. And then how could this act? Then I started reading more and more, and I found, how did this act came to circulation? Become legislated in this manner that it is. Then I found out it was due to a conflict between the CM of Millennium and the district council, the then former general secretary of the Federation of Khasi States, Payam Germanic CM. Now he went into a severe conflict with the district council. It went right up to the Supreme Court. They won in the High Court. The CM of Millennium won in the High Court. By then, the district council probably got more wise. They legislated a law, and by which time, when it came for hearing at the Supreme Court, by then the court said, because there's a law, they can remove the same. And actually, the interpretation of that law vis-a-vis the same, because he had taken a sanat, was so really, really hurtful. If you were to read that language there. But, no disrespect to the courts. The courts were just trying to interpret to what extent, the reference they took from other rulings on this kind of situation, where if you are appointed by an authority, then you are subject to their conditions and rules. Incidentally, at that point of time, this other organization was also starting to come out, the Untitled National Liberation Council. So they made their intention known to struggle for the cause of the freedom of the Khasi states. So they started becoming very aggressive and very thing. And they were talking about that. They also referred to instrument of possession. They also referred to this problem of forceful annexation. So then I started reading, and then I got back to the same of Khairim, and I asked him, okay, now I'm finding something very different. And I find the sixth schedule totally in contradiction with the tradition. So on one hand, I revere you as the same of Khairim, revere you in high regard. How can there be an act which then demeans this office to such an extent, which I cannot even mention here? So he said, well, you know what to do. They have the power to make that law. So he sounds really helpless. And I thought, okay, would this conflict my conscience, my thought process? And I reflect back, my brother was jailed for trying to implement that decision of that institution. And then I recollected, my late father brought a law for that protection of this land. And I'm wondering, then he was representing another case relating to the Nongklau clan, where this court, the kind of interpretation was, okay, there's no more such land ownership existing. This was very strange. So I then decided, okay, I have to go in depth more on this. And that's how that led me to first do more studies in terms of reference, getting books. And then I started asking the same, okay, then who would be able in a position to tell me the real truth about our situation of this? On one hand, we have this insurgent group talking about that we were supposed to have been an independent in nature after the British left. And even my late father raised the issue of the Indian Independence Act 1947 in his representing the case for the Nongklau clan. Section 7 of the Indian Independence Act says that all treaties, sanats, engagements, everything lapsed and reverts back to its original status. So that got me to ask the same, and the same couldn't give me much reply except to the fact that he knew from his ancestors that, yes, that instrument of accession also was a forceful document. However, they managed to incorporate certain provisions there. And even that document was also not, finally at the end, not included. So I asked the same, then who else can tell me is there any book, is there any document that will tell me or explain to me this is the chronological order of events, this is what happened? Because as a young person at that time in 1998, I was faced with these realities that on one hand, you have a forceful annexation claimed by a group, armed group. And then you had this Ames, strangely, under a 1959 act, which demeaned them in such a position, it's just unthinkable. Even today, I feel it's really, really, it has worked as a disadvantage to the Khasis. So this got me really asking, and then I did meet. Then Dr. Balaji Sim said, okay, there's one gentleman that you have to meet if you are really interested in this. And then, he said, you can always continue with your politics and then keep going and talking, and then you will discover more. You'll have authority to speak about this. So he mentioned that I should meet late Gilbert Shulai, who was a former chief executive member himself. And I believe he also resigned as the CEM of the district council, the United Khasi and Jaintia Autonomous District Council. And so I had a difficult time trying to meet him, in the sense that he had aged by then, and he was getting a little bit, he sounded irritated in trying to get an appointment. And finally, he agreed on the intervention of Dr. Balaji, whom I'm very grateful that had he not intervened, I think he would not be that willing to meet me or talk to me. Reason being, when I finally met him, I asked him, why are you, why did you express hesitation in trying to meet me? And, I just wanted to know the actual story. So he said that, like you, there have been many who have come and met me. And they've said, yes, we'll take this, we'll talk this, we'll do this. And they've gone into different platforms and forgotten about this. I don't want to name who they are, but he said, so I was quite surprised. And I realized, okay. So he said, what guarantee is there that you will also, get into the same track? I've seen so many come to me and they've gone away in different platforms. So he told me, look, he has contributed to this writing. And so his books are very valuable. I've tried to have a copy of all his books. And he told me that if you want to know this, you have to have a lot of patience and you have to read all these books. You have to understand the whole situation then. Then I told him, okay, look, okay, I'll do it. And so in short, it took me around 6 months to sit with him patiently. It's like attending classes. And it was not like an everyday thing. It was like, okay, once a week. And then he'd give me a chapter page and tell me to read. And I couldn't piece the events together, because if you look at Gilbert's books, for example, from British India to Bharat India, he's produced a small booklet just showing these notifications. Now, what did they mean? What were they? All that. So it was really, really a trying time for me in trying to connect these dots. And I can only say that he has been instrumental in trying to help me to understand. But it took also from my end a lot of effort to read all this and trying to piece all this together. Because, from the time, the end of the war, to then you're talking about the visit of Freeman Thomas in 1933, when the chiefs were already, from that time it triggered all this. The Khasi National Darbar, how did the Khasi National Darbar get eclipsed and, go into the sunset? And, the same leaders then went on a different went on a different track to shout for Hill State. So all these things took me a thing. You had the FKS, you had the KND, then you had the various groups of elite Khasi men and women representing various things. The meetings with the governor, the trying to negotiate. A negotiating team was sent to Delhi at the last minute to try and see if they can correct the wrong in the constitution, in the draft. So all these things, trying to piece together all this required naturally a lot of reading. And you needed a mentor who will be able to explain to you, what is this? What is this? It took me a while to understand. Bakil said, can you understand the constitutional anomaly present in the constitution today, till today? I was quite surprised. And he said, do you know that because we did not merge, so the word Khasi state, all the states who merge, the princely states, you don't see their names anymore in the constitution of India. Their respective name may still be around only if they have, become a province. So it's like Tripura became a province, a state. But the word Khasi state could not be erased because we did not merge, and hence they have described us within the first schedule within the boundaries of Assam. I must appreciate the law judiciary, the law officers of that time, when it was called the Ministry of States. They also are stuck. They said what to do. Unless they signed a merger, we can't forcefully put them in any state. Now, if they had put the Khasi state into that first schedule, there should have been no more mention of that the word Khasi state itself. So this is the anomaly which is yet to be corrected, because the instrument of session also is yet to be concluded. So the methodology that I adopted was very simple. I thought, okay, if this is the document that our chief signed, in spite of the controversy that that was there on it, where a number of groups also say that it was a forced document. So I looked at that document, which they say, okay, it was a forced, or still, there was still clarity there in terms of 5 issues. It was a conditional treaty. So in terms of judiciary, in accordance with customary law, in terms of forest, the government of India would be in an advisory capacity. In terms of revenue, in terms of land, in terms of territory of the Khasi states, and there was one point, there was an attempt to misguide the people by certain groups, who were against the move of the Sames, who wanted to derail the signature, the signing of the instrument of accession, in spite of whatever form it was. There was a strong attempt to derail it, and so as to say that you have 25 Khasi states who have signed the treaty, while around 30 plus Sardarships, so 29 Sardarships or 30 Sardarships who are outside of that arrangement. Now, if you look from terms of number, that number, 30 versus 25, it would seem that this is like almost 50% of the people outside of this arrangement. So whoever took the story to Delhi, whoever was trying to give a negative story on this, they did a lot of harm to the whole process. And for everyone's information, these 33 were small villages which originally belonged to one or the other Khasi state. Some of them were a Khasi state and were degraded by the British to become a Sardarship, like Nagpur. It's the same ship. It was degraded to become a Sardarship. It's like a punishment or kind of thing. So which the district council should have, or the authorities should have reverted it back to its original status. So there are a lot of issues here. So I first went into the instrument of accession, read it line by line, word by word. And the most important part in this treaty was paragraph 1 of the annex agreement, which says that this arrangement shall continue in force. In the original draft in Governor's House, the document was shall continue in force for a period of 2 years. When it reached Delhi, it came back. They removed the word 2 years. So today's the official instrument of accession, which was then accepted by the Governor General, was an IOA that did do the same, except the words for a period of 2 years was removed. So the IOA today reads that this arrangement shall continue in force until new or modified arrangements have been arrived at between the respective parties, that is the Dominion of India, the province of Assam on one hand, and the Khasi states on the other hand. So that conclusion has not yet been done. That arrangement, that conclusion, because this is 48. You are framing the Constitution of India. These were the things they had signed, that we agree to accede with you in India, subject that you have, we are exempted from these matters. One of which, the last and the most important point, the fifth one was, one of the conditions was legislation. So in matters of legislation, there shall be representation. So I keep asking a lot of people, where's the representation? So when I was, encouraged to enter the politics of the MDC, the District Council, so I thought, would this be a representation of the Hima, of the Khasi state? Some would say, because the politics would hijack the whole thing and say, we are going there to protect identity, this. India, and I find that if I go there, I'm actually going and representing a political party, the ideology of that political party, the manifesto of the party, which has nothing to do with the ideology or the principles or the values of this our tradition. I mean, so legislation, one was we should have representation. If you talk to, as you mentioned just now, if you look from the national perspective, you'll say, yes, we have given you representation. 55 out of the 60 seats in Meghalaya is reserved for a scheduled tribe. All the MDCs in the district council are Khasis. Similarly in Garo and Jaintia. So what kind of representation are you talking about? And I say, no. They are not representing, they have not come out representing their kingdom, their Hima, their state. Because they are contesting on party-based principles. That is one. There was another line that continues in that same legislation clause, which says that assuming if that is not possible, all laws which will be legislated shall be such that it can be modified to suit the conditions existing in the Khasi Hills. Which meant that legislation means what? Means legislation which comes out from the assembly and the parliament. So if we had this document pronounced in an article specifically within the Constitution of India, then all acts of legislation from parliament, central legislation, would probably be similar to what Gazette notifications, the general ones which come out, used to come out, which would say this, in every act they would say, it would have a proviso which says extension of the act. So it would say this act would extend to the whole of India except Jammu and Kashmir. It should be, actually, this act shall extend to the whole of India except Jammu and Kashmir and the Khasi states. So for whatever reason, this document was not found in the Constitution of India. And that is one thing which, so I read on this restored accession. And I looked at it and I said, okay, what are the facts here? The facts here is has it been signed by the chiefs? Yes, it has been signed. Individually and collectively as the Federation of Khasi States. Was it accepted by the government of India? Yes. Where's the evidence for that? Yes, it is there in some white paper. What is that white paper? It's a white paper which Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel presented to Parliament, a white paper, a documentation compilation of all the treaties of all the princely states. These are the arrangements. Practically everybody merged. So that white paper, I had to look for it. Then, we didn't have all this Zoom, we didn't have all the social media, we didn't have internet, we didn't have all that at that point of time. So I had to rely on documentation from Bar Gilbert Shrai and then, trying to go to various books in the library. Not much. Then, so I thought, okay, this act, the incident, the ruling on Same Jomanic, then I also further found out the status of Hima Maliyam at that point of time. There was an acting chief there. But by and large, I started inquiring from many friends. And then I find that...
There was a little bit stuck just now. Say that again. The thing got a bit stuck.
Oh, okay.
You were saying something. Huh.
Yeah, I was trying to, was the IOA a fact? Did it have an agreement? Was it a conditional? Because I checked tried to, read from whatever I could about the IOA of the other states in Gilbert's book. So there were he had some documents with him. And their IOA then what happened after the IWA? Then they had to sign the merger. So they lost all identity and became one with it, merged everything into creation of one India. So have the Khasi states signed any merger? None at all. Was this document officially accepted, signed by the authority of India? Yes, it was signed by C. Rajagopal Palachari, the then Governor General of India. Rather, he became subsequently, I think, the first president of India. Then you have was this document documented and officially handed over in some platform or some official body? Yes, it was handed over by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel in a document called the White Paper, where he compiled all the treaties of all the 565 princely states. Did any of the princely states have any issues? Yes, we saw history tells us there was an issue in Hyderabad. Of course, then there was a forceful annexation there for whatever reason. And Jammu and Kashmir. So Jammu and Kashmir found special mention in Article 370. Lucky for them, because they had 4 representatives in the Constituent Assembly. So that was another issue. I tried to check out whether we had any representative. We had none. The Khasi states, mind you. Yes, we did have Reverend J.J.M. Nichols Roy, but he was representing the government of Assam. He was selected by the government of Assam. He was then a minister of Assam. He was the face of... Because I tried to read and understand what was his intention of, going a different way. Because it then turned out that what he pursued was in total conflict to what the chiefs were pursuing. And they finally became a big conflict. And hence he pursued the 6th schedule thing. And from what I can gather is that Assam government probably has utilized it to that effect. And he must have had his own. But towards the end, I have reproduced his memoirs, his quotes, where he said, I was a hillman alone. I couldn't do anything anymore. And he said at the last stage, the Premier of Assam, Gopinath Bodoloi, backstabbed him and changed the draft of the subcommittee. So these are facts that I started seeing, collecting, reading, being informed. And the next question is, what do you do? So what do you do? Question is this: in 1948, 47, 49, events of 50. Is it relevant today? That's the most important question. Is it relevant today? As you said earlier, you can look at it as a historical prospect, or you can look at it as, some. But is this relevant to our life today? So I went back to this AM and told him this is what I found, and it is really difficult for me to try to see if I can do both at the same time. That is, get into the politics and then go and find out about this story some more. He said initially, he said, yeah, you can do, because you'd have that office and this. I recall I had a final sitting with Gilbert Schley, and he told me, yes, you may have the power, the authority to go as an MDC here and there, but remember always, the institutions are partyless. So every time you went to any kingdom to try and narrate this and find out from them what is all this about, what do they feel about this, they would look at you first from the magnifying glass of a party man. So your intentions or your advocacy on trying to find out the reality of this will be slightly diluted. However, he said, if you were to go as a free person, a neutral person, probably they would, they would appreciate that much better. You would get a much better response, and people may listen to you. So that's when I decided, okay, after a lot of thought and thing, I informed my friends and I said, look, I'm resigning from party politics. And I'll just try and see. I just want to ensure that whether my to satisfy myself, people would have thought, okay, I recall so many people called me up and told me that I've done the most foolish thing of resigning from the politics because you could do the same. So I didn't have the energy to, you don't have the resources to, the wherewithal of the government to advertise and to announce and to create awareness. So whoever I could meet personally, I explained to them, but it is like I'm talking to you now. Only very few people who understand what we are probably talking right now. So anyways, I told the same of Haidem, I find this Act 59 very demeaning. I find this problem of the 6th schedule, which has put the chiefs in such a position of the institution, the way they've defined it, is utterly wrong. But then, how is it that your people don't know about it? So the CM said, okay, they don't know because the years have gone, right? The years have gone, the years have passed, and since 1950. And in fact, subsequently, I stumbled onto the book of late R.S. Lingdo, and there I find him writing a note, making a mention that on after 26th of January 1950, after the constitution came into effect, the office of the Khasi states was put under lock and key. The files, the documents were seized. The bank account, you can imagine at that point it was around 3 lakhs, was transferred to create the fund, was made to become the fund of the district council. What a thing. So, I had all these books. I remember I read another book of Professor, he was a St. Edmunds professor. I can't recall his name right away, Shibani something. I read his book and I was like taken aback when I quote what he wrote there. He said, by then, Reverend Nicholas Roy had become an avowed enemy of the Khasi chiefs. This is a book from Professor, I've forgotten his name. From Chaubi, yeah, correct, from St. Edmunds. Then I read some other writings of Gilbert Shulai. So I thought, okay, I was also pretty nervous. Like, okay, I'm venturing on something which is, but I thought, okay, what is the process that I have to figure out is whether this is still relevant to the people or not. Because while all the princely states have lost their identity, how is it that these small, very minuscule chiefs in the map of India was still in existence, right? They did not merge. I asked the same, Government of India surely would have come to, he said, yes. In fact, Sarab Patel came here, Jawaharlal Nehru came here wondering what is wrong, why these people can't merge, why is the governor not being able to assert force? Yes, he asserted force to get the chiefs to sign the IOA. There were a lot of protected negotiations going on. Then the same told me the sames could never sign because they were not the landowners. They could not sign the merger. Unlike the Maharaja, say of Patiala, Jaipur, or he was king, he would be a god, he could judge, he could sentence somebody to death. He was all in all. So our tradition, that's why I started off in the beginning that fortunately we have a very unique institution found nowhere else in the world, probably except with the natives of some of the natives in Africa or some of the natives in the North America. So you own the land. Now, who owns the land? The people. What was this document about? Nothing. When I started off, some people saying, "Hey, Bajon, you are trying to empower the CM." I said, no. This is empowering ourselves, the people, Khunu Hajar, the citizens. So I have to go and find out from them whether they feel this document is important or not. So I discussed with CM, resigned from the politics. He issued notices for respective places in his territory. He decided popularly we do it on a market day. And in December, January, February of 1999, I ran around, campaigned around in the midst of a upcoming MDC election, and went aggressively to call for the abolition of the district council, naming it as a hoax to the people, and that we should, seriously review and discuss the instrument of accession. So I went to every gathering, and I recall when I went to one meeting in Mokondro area, Dingling, it was then known as Dingling Constituency, and it was a market day. The headmen there in that area, they said, we thought the CMs brought the 6th schedule. Only now you're telling us that the chiefs are now the slaves or the employees of the thing. They could not imagine that such a thing had happened. So I said, this is what it is right now. So when I asked them, do you feel that... So on the ground, people psychologically were under the impression that the 6th schedule was something which was welcomed by the chiefs. Why it has developed into such a thing? Because you can imagine, after having signed the instrument of accession, the government of India, it does not find place in the Constitution of India. You have signed a treaty with me for my people, and then you do not put it in the Constitution of India. Or you show me that you have concluded. So I try to find out any document that maybe we have concluded this. Government of India, from their perspective, would very, conveniently, they have replied in many occasions to say, we have given you what you wanted. We've given you the 6th schedule. We've given you autonomous district council. You now even have a state of your own. You have your own legislators. You have your own MP. But that was something which was imposed on us. So in 50, when this thing did not happen, it became such a letdown, and there was reports of spread of news that everybody will be arrested. Those who are trying to oppose, So there's a lot of anger, resentment then, which was just controlled within. So that setback, that was a major setback for the Khasi states. And so nobody dared talk about it. Germanic CM tried to reassert his authority, and he also got finished with this 1915 Act, and that became the end of it. Really became the sword over the chiefs. So over the chief's neck, and then this. So no wonder nobody. So you find, ironically, on the opening day of the district council, 27 June 1952, there was lathi charge tear gas, the first time in the history of the Khasis. Lathi charge and tear gas, and some students were arrested. Demonstrations were there for the opposing the composition of the members of that council, primarily because there were 4 non-tribals.
John.
So, yeah.
So we have gone about 1 hour. I think if we 1 hour, which basically means that the video might be very long. It might be too long, nah? So then we can continue. No, we can continue another session on this particular line. But just so if we can stop here with the district council inauguration, then we can pursue it in the next session and go into a little bit details after the 19.
Let me just conclude here then. To just say this, that the methodology that I had adopted was I had to go to the people, go to the chiefs also, right, and go to the people with the information that I had. I had to first go to the people and find out whether they related this document, whether it still relates to them or not. Then, one after another, constitutional, central legislation, Supreme Court rulings, these things started happening, which further confirmed that this document was even more relevant than ever before, even in its compromise form. That's why the Khasi states, their original stand was that this document was for period of 2 years, because we weren't sure what kind of constitution you were framing. So you had to come back and discuss with us, or we had to, sit down and negotiate. So the Constitution of India, as it is today, is not a settlement of the arrangement between the Khasi states, because no arrangement has been done till today. So a sixth schedule has been passed by them, not in agreement with us, the Khasi states. And that's how it is. So I went to the people, and since I found that this was extremely relevant, so I recall Gilbert telling me, he said, I have a capacity only to write. So I have contributed, and I feel that is a very important matter, and I have put down everything in pen and paper. And this is like very important. It depends how you want to use it. But it is a very relevant document. So he said, if you have the capacity to go to the people, it's up to you. You go. So that's what I did. I decided to go to the people, and I found huge, tremendous response from people who fully agreed, even agreed to the restoration of the Khasi assembly. Would have been a Khasi parliament, because our accession with India would have been a different nature. If you recall the photograph, you had the Indian flag flying a little higher than the Khasi state's flag. They conducted the elections in 49, elected the people, the governor went and inaugurated it. So this solemn national commitment was unfulfilled. You asked a question earlier, why is it that you are different, and what is it that the others are not doing or not recognizing this? I can only say this, that, one is that the government of India is intentionally, they know this fact very well. But, as like every nation, every larger community, larger authority, if you go to Russia, they're trying to, downplay the issues of Croatia, downplay Ukraine, downplay all that. So similarly here also, the government of India knows fully well who are the real stakeholders. But so let us play with this. Let us see to what extent they will, So government of India thought probably, in 20 years, they'll forget about all this. Unfortunately, they didn't realize that people, these institutions are so dear to them. We have been able to, we've not been given a proper.
Just check, Pajan, a little bit, the internet.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now it's working again.
Sorry. So, yeah. So what I'm saying is, government of India thought that this will be finished. Assimilation will take place. People will be happy, forgotten, because they have legislators. But it has not happened. And 68 years down the line, this document is even more relevant than ever today. I've been called to many, many platforms to now speak on this, to now say something this. They have urged me to, to bring out a book on this. People have asked me to do all kinds of things. So we've tried to translate. So one thing what I've been able to do is, when you ask me what was the process that I adopted a process of going to the people and explaining to the people, this is your rights. It's up to you. So that methodology has worked. I mean, from your perspective as an academician, your interests, or maybe many people would have, academicians would have an interest to publish the documents. Fine. But this is a live document. So it's not a document that was signed in 48 and is finished. No. I recall we went to then I started realizing, like I said, there were these other groups who went on a non-violent, who were armed groups. They started making a lot of noise, a lot of, making an impact at one point, and then it became very violent, and government also reacted very violently. There's a sad situation. We also have, yesterday was 21st October was his death anniversary of Wycliffe's aim. So this is another part, This is another part that triggered my thought process. How is it that one of the chiefs is in self-exile in Bangladesh? Now Bangladesh, that was East Pakistan. So reading their history, reading their thing, that has also further triggered me to say, okay, there's something really, really wrong in this entire annexation process, which needs to be sorted out. Bagilbert Shulai told me clearly, he has written all these books. It doesn't mean that it will be sorted out in his lifetime. I went and started talking to the people. I said, because they said, Ari, you're the only fellow who's come to talk about this. We've never heard any politician come and, explain to us about these rights. We never knew we had these rights. So I said, just remember one thing. They will come and abuse what I'm saying, because there were many politicians who went back to the field to say what John Cushing is saying is all, hogwash. It is all bakwas. It'll never happen. So then I started piecing together these problems. We face the problem of forests. We are now facing the problems on minerals. We have rights over minerals, right over forests, right over land. We are facing problems with boundary. We are facing problem with central legislation in so many ways. And I only have this document to show to people that because of this is the problem. So, I'm thankful for you that you have given this
Correct.
talk. Right. So, off the cuff now, I can just say the methodology that I had adopted was collecting the information and giving it back to the people.
So just quick questions, Vajan, just to kind of, I think we need to continue, 3-4 more sessions of this kind to give us an overarching picture of, the sense of how did you went about, that was the initial period, which is to do a lot with reading. Yeah. You were reading to understand. But after 98 now, you began to engage directly with the reality. And as you engage with the reality, there were many more realities that you yourself produce. A lot of not only your writings, but also your press release and your engagement with the institution and the organization of so many processes that took place. So that we can discuss again another time.
Yeah, another time.
But now just correct. So now just a quick to get a sense from you. Like, suppose now you were to advise anybody else who's interested, or anybody who's interested in this issue, on how they should learn about these processes, so that they can understand this issue better. What would be your first immediate response?
My immediate response would be that this document, it's one session at the Annex Agreement. For them to understand better, they had to understand their traditional system. When I say why it is relevant, why it is important, why I found it relevant to the people, why the people to whom, wherever I went, found it very, very important. A lot of people will say, yes, this is a very important thing. But they're all at a loss as to how do we put it in place, right? That is because you have varying. So I would advise somebody, if you want to understand this, you have to understand, because this document speaks about nothing but this treaty of ours signed on various dates, and accepted by the Governor General of India on 17 August 1948. By the way, I would sometimes, in the past, we would gather on 17 August 48 to try and have to recall the signing of this document, acceptance by the Government of India, to remind them that it has not yet been fulfilled. So, when you look at the treaty terms, the conditions, they all relate to the rights of the people, nothing to do with anything else. So when I would go and look at a problem of I gave you a very small example when my elder brother was arrested, that Dorbashanam decided to close that bar. And the government said no. So what is the problem? That we face in 48, continually till now, and then sometime in the 80s, when my brother became a village headman, tried to implement the thing. That is at the bottom, at the grassroots. The non recognition of this institution. So it's something that everybody is living in denial. Everybody is living in denial. So I was talking to some people yesterday and I said, okay, unfortunately you have some conflicts going on today, some major conflicts. The Khasi Students Union, various groups, they've been in agitation for many, many years. I just mentioned to you from 1952, that issue of non-tribal, very emotional matter. Sense of insecurity is there. Why? Because this system has not been recognized, mentioned in the Constitution of India. So this non-fulfillment. So what is it? It is the institutions of self-government. Late Rajiv Gandhi, as Prime Minister, mind you, he exempted Panchayati Raj, 73rd, 74th Amendment from the which article is that? 243ZC. Exempts the Panchayati Raj from the scheduled areas. Because he says that there exists traditional institutions of self-government. Mind you, these are the words, not of Rajiv Gandhi, but of the Prime Minister in Parliament, that we are exempting 73rd, 74th Amendment because there are traditional institutions of self-government. Now, this traditional institution of self-government has not been found, has not yet found space in the Constitution of India. So when you ask me that, these few off-the-cuff questions as to what would you advise somebody, they had to, right? Do you find a write-up on the Dorbashanam? No. Do you find the name of Dobaraj? No. I mean, people would not know. Even the judges, honorable judges in the courts also would have a trying time to understand this. Any other question? I mean, I don't know if I've replied to you effectively on
Correct.
this.
No, just to get no, in the sense, like, for instance, look at it this way. Like, suppose, because you're engaging with the reality that you belong to. Suppose now you were to do a similar exercise and advise someone who's researching another community. Suppose you're researching another community. Suppose you research the history of the Garos.
Yeah.
What would your advice be from your experience? How does someone get to know that reality?
So first I'd have to understand their tradition. And to understand the tradition is not to read the books. As you mentioned earlier, it's not about... So you have to actually talk to them. It's what you've been doing by having a dialogue, with the real people. So you talk to as many people as possible, and then you will summarize that this is the tradition that has been there, right? Because you can't resurrect or you can't protect something which is not, which is not happening right now. That's the reality. That's the unfortunate part of it. So similarly here, the reality, yes, the Dorbashanam is very effective. When you go further up, Dobaraj, a little bit of a gray area there because, they've not been functioning properly. Or rather, they've not been allowed to function properly. Then you go further up at the Hima level, there also the decay is there because they've not been allowed to effectively function because the politics fear people may get swept to this other side. Fortunately, anyway, for the activism that we've done, a number of legislation has started in the process of codification. Okay. So if I were to advise another community, I would only say that kindly go and talk to the people on the ground. I've traveled extensively to, you name it, the corners of the state, especially in Khasi and Jaindi Hills, and to I've even gone and spent a night in one of the chief's house, who kept apologizing and kept wanting me not to come because of his the condition of his house. But I went and stayed in his house in all that condition it was in. So in a very remote village, then I get to understand, okay, why do the people, while there could be also a question as to how come the Rajas of all over the country were unpopular. In fact, they happily got rid of them, right? How is it that our chiefs here in the tribal areas of Khasi Hills, Garo Hills in general, because it was of a different kind. It was a different kind. For how many generations this has lasted? How many thousand years ago did it start? That's something which we'll never know right now. So I can only request other communities, other brothers, other tribes to see and examine, what is happening right now. So what is happening right now. Are you in conflict because of what? What could be a more... there's another issue here, that the constitutional politics is based on the majority, which is first past the post. The constitutional mechanism in the Khasi states is by consensus and referendum. So there's a lot of debate on that. District Council has said, no, this is not possible. I've always viewed in Khasi we say Dorbar Bray. It's a God's gathering. It's blessed by the Almighty to be a sacred. When you have a Dorbar, when you have a people's assembly or people's parliament or gathering, it is an assembly which is has the blessings of the Almighty. So such a gathering should not be taken lightly, and hence the ancient tradition was the raising of hands, right? They said, no, in nowadays thing, you go to the ballot. So I have this conflict going on in many of the traditional institutions where they say, okay, we are far better off to go to the ballot because of it. So these are the interactions that are taking place in the process of assimilation, right, of the institution. But I feel people, on one hand, you have a CM who does not even have any funding, who have no funds at all. There was a reporter from Delhi, I think he came, wanted to interview the CM of Khairim. So he asked him, do you give any schemes? He said, no. Do you have any funds like an MP, MLA? He gives funds. So I don't have anything. Do you get a salary? No. So when he came out of that interviewed another layman outside the office. He said, why do you want him? Do you think this institution should remain? Because you don't even get a football boot. You don't, all MLAs, politicians will give you all goodies. He can't even give you anything. Don't you think it should be done away with? I mean, this is a journalist, from mainland India. That gentleman outside, he said, no, he may not be able to give us anything, but he's our identity. He's our identity. He's our, they connect with that. And so, it's a very strange thing. It's in our blood, I guess, that we have to engage, we live with this. And at my village level, I live with my Rambadong or Patong at a higher level at a different platform. So the groups, the tribes, the world of India, they have to figure out first whether their tradition still exists or not. If they exist, what was it? Are there any writings on it? Any facts, evidence? So that is very important. That is very important because you cannot just go and resurrect something. You cannot go and create something. I have some friends from Arunachal who say they're very unhappy with the Panchayati Raj. They did not think it would get them into conflict. This is in areas where they have the chieftains, the Nocte clan. So they've invited me to come and explain to them, about this. They want to get out of the Panchayat because. So I said, how come you never spoke at that time? They said, no, we were given to understand that it is you'll get development, you'll get this, you'll get that. So now they are facing that heat in that end, So we were lucky at that point of time that our chief went to Calcutta. It was some kind of a major Maha Panchayat, 88, 89. Rajiv Gandhi was something in West Bengal. I'm trying to find records of that because the chief gave a representation there to say kindly, allow us to examine us for this because we got it. And based on that gathering and that meeting there in Calcutta, it was a massive Maha Panchayat gathering. They went and gave this memorandum, some delegation of the chief with the district council officials and all that. So that's how, Article 243 ZC exempts this from scheduled areas. Now, British came 100 years ago, 200 years ago. They have traveled throughout the whole of central India. They must have destroyed all the traditions that they had in various tribes and communities. They tried to do it here. But there was a lot of, fight even here. So one can imagine what they have done in areas where they had so easily, conquered. And in those areas, they even faced the onslaught of the Mughal emperors. So it will not be easy for the other tribes. I would imagine that they would have a very difficult time in trying to finding out the actual tradition, what it is, what it was, what it is now, because of these historical events of conquest.
How do you see history, Bhajan? How do you see what is history to you? Like if someone was to simply ask you a basic question, like in this whole engagement that you've had, how do you look at this idea called history? Like what is?
I've seen when I look at history nowadays, I look at it with suspect. Because as you rightly said earlier, there's a famous quote, no? They say the history is written by the victors. History is always written by the victors. Those who won the war, they will write the history. So that's why you have so much of British history, right? And they wrote it according to their own, interpretation. So history, I appreciate history. I love it. It is so interesting. But I would look at every piece of history with a little bit of pinch of salt, in the sense that not that I am questioning the authority or the veracity or the accuracy of that history, but the manner or the message of which is also inserted in that history. What is the message? So there are various messages that come in. So even in our own Khasi history, there's a lot of, there are attempts by historians to interpret history in a different manner, because I'm also influenced by my beliefs, So if I'm in a certain, some people may be upset with what I'm saying, but if I'm supposing I'm, very well in Meghalaya, we have how many faiths, right? I recall reading a book of the assistant of Major Adam White, assistant to David Scott. So he wrote there that they had a very difficult, and David Scott was very, very upset with the CM Sora. Extremely upset for him for disallowing some missionaries to start a school. And he considered it, he considered it as, at one point he wanted to really, handle the same in a very different, a more aggressive manner, instead of the kind of cat and mouse kind of an approach. He wanted to get on really aggressive. I've forgotten the name, which CM was that, but he was really opposing, not allowing the setting up of school to be run by them. So, so on one hand, they said, no, because I'm going to teach you how to read, I'm going to teach you how to write, But they even had the other intentions of, obviously, the conqueror would have his own idea. It's like the Mughals. When they conquer, they ensure everybody becomes a Muslim. It's like Genghis Khan. He ensured that he slaughtered everybody. And only his offerings would continue to grow. So these are the ills of that time. And these has caused problems subsequently, where people now, after 200 years, assuming they're in a certain position of power to deal with our tradition, their focus towards this tradition would look at it in a very different thing. That's why at times I always tend to question that we have a dichotomy in the sense that we have a district council affairs minister at the cabinet level. If there is a conflict of issue between the district council and the state, you would never have heard a district council affairs minister to stand for or to resign from his position on behalf of the district council. It's conflict of interest because he would also be bound by the decision of the cabinet. So these are institutions which require special space in the Constitution of India. What we are struggling, what we are trying to say, what was that agreement by the chiefs and the government of India also was very simple. We have our own way of living. We have our own way of thinking. Yes, we agree. We would like to learn. We would like to engage a lot. But at the end of the day, the Khasis have a process of deciding by themselves. Rather than, somebody comes and says, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this. So they would like to decide by themselves. They feel if they're given a chance to participate in the decision-making process, yes, that's the word. The Khasi society is built on the citizens taking part in the decision-making process. What is the decision-making process in the Indian mechanism today? Is we go and vote once in 5 years. If we die, so you have today a lot of shout about this farmers' bill, whether right or wrong, we don't know. We are yet to go to the complete details of it. People's participation. I've had some exposure and to see the Swiss cantons in Switzerland, where the voting happens till today by the citizens on every law. So yes, when you say what is my advice is that you got to really, really understand, find out what is relevant to the people today.
In relation to this, for instance, in your experience, what if there was no Gilbert Sholai? What would have happened?
That's a good question. It would have been extremely difficult. Yeah, when I think of it, it would have been extremely, extremely difficult for any other person to have explained to me what I managed to capture from what he explained to me and then put it into the context of joining all the dots. Because he would give me a book of, say, a kind of a notification or a document of the government of India. He'd show me a particular document of a certain period, certain time, and I had to interpret, okay, how is this connected with? So they were all interconnected. If he hadn't produced those books, if he hadn't published those papers, if he hadn't shared his insight, his thoughts with me, if he hadn't taken me in as literally like a student to tell me, to help me understand what this was all about, I think it would have been with Bar Gilbert. If Bar Gilbert were not around, then I don't think I would have reached this situation here. It's a very, very, very. No, but I'm saying, maybe there could have been other people. But I tried to ask in that time, who else other than you had this interest to collect all these documents, to collect all these newspapers of that time, to treasure that information and to hand it over. So there was another gentleman called E.M.R. Reed, Ivan Reed. He also was a person of that time, but in relation to the academic information.
Yeah.
In relation to the academic information, Ivan Reed did not have the material that Bar Gilbert had. And since he did not have the material, he knew the history. Yes, we signed this agreement, we signed this, we signed that. Okay, right? By Ivan Reed. So he contributed in a different way, in the sense of he was narrating his, what he and many others, young, men, Khasi men of that time, what they were aspiring for, what they were hoping for. But where are these documents? Where are these papers? So he was not one who had collected that. So that way, Bar Gilbert Shulai was a gold mine. Was a gold mine as far as I was concerned, because he printed, published, probably, because he was also former CM of the District Council. So I have a feeling that they locked up the room of the office of the FKS, seized all the documents. And he was a CM at one point there, and I think I must have, had access to some of the documents and so on and so forth. So yes, I can say that he is a key central figure in this, my being able to then capture it from him and, take it forward. And I'm very happy that you now are trying also, caught up on a part of it, right?
Yeah.
So there was another gentleman, Banishan Walam. He was also there. But Banishan also had only a limited amount of inputs. And so these are important people who were giving this, filling in the dots.
Anyway, so shall we stop here today?